The Louisville Cardinals got a dominant win over the Pittsburgh Panthers on Senior Day.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Card Nation? Welcome into this special Sunday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the university, third year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, guys, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to get started today. The Louisville Cardinals ended the 2024 home slate with a dominant 37-9 victory over the Pittsburgh Panthers on Senior Day. Really encouraging result following the debacle at Stanford last weekend. We'll explain what went right for the Cardinals, what was encouraging, etc. The men's basketball team, a rare Friday home game, but nonetheless, a 76-61 victory over Winthrop. Some really good things that we saw on Friday night, but still some issues that need to be corrected moving forward. But nonetheless, really good weekend for Louisville sports. And literally last weekend, you said the exact opposite. So it's one of those things to where, you'll love to see the teams bounce back, especially football. After the debacle against Stanford, I was concerned about the vibes in the locker room. How was this team going to respond? How were they going to look against Pittsburgh? And those concerns were pretty quickly squashed on Saturday. Louisville came out ready to go. They were energized, and they had a really good first quarter. And a couple things that we really haven't seen much this season, beginning with the first quarter strength. Like, the first quarter's been the Achilles heel for this team. And it's been pretty evident. Outside of Clemson and Austin Peay, the Cardinals just have not played well to start games. It seems like whatever the game plan is, either the game plan isn't what it needs to be, or the team's just not executing at the level that they should be. But the vast majority of this season has been Louisville having to overcome a slow start to come back and win games, or they barely lose games. But this game against Pittsburgh was different. It was one of the most complete games of the season. I would probably say the Clemson game was more complete. But Louisville came out ready to go. They were amped up. Yes, it was a little bit of bend but don't break at the beginning when Stanquan Clark got the interception in the end zone. But Louisville's offense got going early. They led after the first quarter 10-0. And I would venture into saying, going back and looking in the season, and even against Clemson, they were trailing at the end of the first quarter. I'm trying to think, has there been a game outside of Austin Peay? Did they? I think they were leading against Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State was a good first quarter as well, I should say. But I'm not sure that there was a game outside of that where Louisville led after the first quarter. And that's sad to say, but I'm going back and looking at it. No, there hasn't been a game since the second game of the season where Louisville has led after the first quarter. And that just sort of, magnifies how much Louisville has just has been unable to get out of their own way. But this was a little bit different. It was encouraging to see that the Cardinals being able to bring that energy on Senior Day. And I was impressed with the fan base as well. I got to Cardinals Stadium about 2 hours before game time, did a little bit of tailgating with some friends. And the tailgating lot usually doesn't tell much. It was full like it usually is, but I wasn't expecting a huge crowd. And it was a larger crowd than I thought, and they were into the game and, fighting off the weather. It was cold. It was one of the coldest games, in the past couple of years. But the fan base brought the energy, and the team brought the energy. We've talked on this show, critical at times of this team's energy that we see on the sideline. I go back to the the SMU loss. Like, to start the game, SMU's sideline was just amped up and they were ready to go and they were energized throughout the game. And you look over to Louisville's sideline and it looks almost lethargic and kind of apathetic. And I know that sometimes appearance isn't, always the reality, but Louisville comes out and they don't look the strongest, and it kind of just supports that line of thinking. And in this game against Pittsburgh, it was encouraging because anytime you have a demoralizing loss like you did against Stanford, you worry about the locker room and whether or not a team is going to check out mentally a couple games left in the season. And it was pretty clear that, hey, look, we might have played ourselves out of playoff and ACC contention, but we're still playing for a good amount of pride, for the team. And, you see a lot of the seniors be able to step up and make big plays. And it's pretty weird how eerily similar the past two seasons were in terms of a trend. 2023, you have the statement win against Notre Dame. You drop the ball immediately against a bad Pittsburgh team, and then you follow that up with a statement dominant win against Duke at home. And then let's kind of, look to 2024. You get a statement victory against Clemson. You follow that up with a really bad performance against a Stanford team that's not all that good. And then you follow that up with a dominant win over Pittsburgh. And look, I think that Pittsburgh, granted, look, Eli Holstein went down in the first quarter with an apparent leg injury. I think it was his ankle, could have been his foot, but it was pretty serious right away. They brought the card out. I believe they put a cast on it. Nonetheless, I do want to say that, I think I can speak for the Louisville fan base when I say that we wish Holstein a full and quick recovery. Hopefully it's not as bad as it looked. Hopefully it's not major and that it doesn't require, a long healing process. We do wish him the best of luck in his recovery. So, but this was a Pittsburgh team that started out the year, 7-0. And I was kind of in a dilemma because I gave credit to Pittsburgh for doing what they needed to do to get to 7-0, but I realized that the strength of schedule was not there. And I really didn't think that Pittsburgh was as good as their ranking suggested. And I didn't think that they were going to lose their next 4 games, but I did think that they were going to lose multiple games to conclude the season. So despite them coming into the matchup on a 3-game losing streak, I did think that this was going to be a challenge, especially since we didn't know what Louisville team was going to show up, and every week it seems to be different. And that is one of the problems with kind of previewing matchups. It's like if Louisville's on their A game, then they can compete with any team on the schedule. But if they're playing down to their level of competition, that they can lose to anybody on their schedule. So it was encouraging to see the team bounce back, to send the senior class off on a really nice note. Now we still have the Governor's Cup at the end of the season, literally next week. But it was nice to get the ACC conclusion ending on a solid note. Shout out to guys like Ashton Gelati, Quincy Riley, players that have made some huge plays consistently over the past couple seasons. The transfers that came in, Tyler Shough, Ja'Cory Brooks, the list goes on. And then you have your sort of underrated guys, Des Tell, really consistent anchor in the middle of that interior defensive line. You have Ben Perry, TJ Quinn, MJ Griffin battling back from injury. Really nice to see him have a good season. And then Ramon Puryear. And what a story. I don't feel like people are talking enough about Ramon Puryear, going from a walk-on from Eastern High School to being the program leader in games played for a career. I mean, what a fantastic career that he has had at Louisville. And it hasn't been one that like, oh yeah, he's played, but he really hasn't affected games. Like Ramon Puryear has been really, really good. He gets overshadowed by the likes of Ashton Gelati, Yaya Diaby, Yasir Abdullah, Mason Riger. But, hats off to him. He has been, a huge part of this team. And I think he's sort of the testament to, showing that being a hometown hero, despite the largest of odds, is possible. Like, Puryear definitely needs to be a player that we talk about. When you talk about hometown heroes, yeah, maybe he's not, to the level of guys like Devontae Parker or Brian Brom or Michael Bush, but you're talking about a player from the city of Louisville that walked on. He bet on himself. And what happened? He played for Louisville for multiple seasons, and he holds a record now that's not going to be easy to break. Like the career games played record he took from Yasir Abdullah. Like, this is not easy to break. Now, yes, you have the COVID season, but overall, I mean, what he's been able to do, he's gotten better each and every season. I, applaud him. All the seniors, Michael Gonzalez, really solid player on the interior of that offensive line. And of course, I'm not naming everyone. There's more players that should be recognized, but for the sake of time, we don't have much time. But shout out to this year's senior class. They could have mailed it in when the season got tough, but they didn't. And they answered the call and they rose to the occasion. So I definitely appreciate them. But let's talk about this win a little bit more, because outside of Clemson, this was the most dominant performance of the season for Jeff Brom's team. We'll break it down when we come back on today's episode of Locked on Louisville. Cardinal fans, we've been having a great time all season, keeping it locked on right here on FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. FanDuel knew a lot more than I did coming into this game. They were at one point an 8.5-point favorite, even a 10-point favorite over Pittsburgh. And, they looked like they were going to cash that bet in at halftime. So shout out to FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked on Louisville your first listen of the day all throughout this football season. I can't believe that was the last home game of the year. Like, I feel like I just got to the parking lot ahead of the matchup against Austin Peay, but time flies when you're having fun, and it's been an up and down season. But this was a really solid way to cap off the home schedule with a dominant 37-9 victory over Pittsburgh. Yes, look, it is worth mentioning that the Panthers did deal with injuries this game. Eli Holstein going down 100% affected this game because they were moving the ball with him at quarterback. But also, when Nate Yarnell took over, Yarnell was a guy that almost led Pittsburgh to upset Clemson last week. Like, they were up 20-17, and if it wasn't for Cade Klubnik basically taking a 60-yard rushing touchdown to the house, they might have upset Dabo Swinney's Tigers, but they ended up losing that game. But it was really, really competitive against a good defense. Now, make no mistake about it, Pittsburgh's offense is better when Eli Holstein is under center. But Louisville's defense, I feel like, really rose to the occasion. They avenged a really challenging performance against Stanford. And you look at these numbers, Pittsburgh had 265 total yards of offense. Louisville pretty much almost doubled them up. Louisville had 507, but 265 total yards of offense, 190 passing, 75 yards rushing. It was just not a great game for Pittsburgh overall. All three quarterbacks that played, Yarnell, Holstein, and David Lynch, all threw interceptions in this game. Pittsburgh really only got the ball inside Louisville territory, like inside Louisville's 40, once. Well, I take that back. I take that back. They got there a couple times. They scored once. Two other times they ended up throwing interceptions. But It was about 3 times, I'll say. They got in Louisville territory, deep in Louisville territory 3 times. 2 of them ended up interceptions. The other one was, well, hold on. Let me go back and think about this. No, it was 2 times. One of the interceptions was, I'm sorry, my mind's going a little fuzzy here. It was 2 times basically because one of them was an interception where Louisville couldn't convert 4th and goal from the 1-yard line. And then Nate Yarnell threw the interception. Stanquan Clark got the interception right about like the 15-yard line. So they had 2 legitimate drives in Louisville territory. One of them was the first drive of the game. Holstein threw an interception to Stanquan Clark in the end zone, and then they scored on the other one in the 3rd quarter. But Louisville ended up going into halftime with a dominant 27-point lead. It was 27-0. Pittsburgh got the touchdown. They ended up getting a safety in the 4th quarter, which I feel like was a bogus safety because I feel like that was a pretty clear touchback. They reviewed it and said that it wasn't. So either I'm dumb and don't understand the touchback rules, or ACC refs are just going to ACC ref. But defensively, this team was really good. 265 yards of offense. They forced 3 turnovers, which is something that they haven't done a lot this year. Looking at the sack numbers, they ended up getting, I think it was 2 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, and 4 pass deflections. I was really impressed with Stanquan Clark in this one. Antonio Watts was huge. MJ Riley, MJ Griffin, TJ Quinn, Tamari McDonald, Ashton Gelati. The list goes on. So pretty solid defensive performance. I feel like they kept running back Desmond Reed in check. He had 19 for 59. So really good defensive performance. And Louisville's offense did really well against a Pittsburgh defense that I felt like, was going to keep Louisville in check a little bit in terms of the rushing department. Pittsburgh had a top 15 rushing defense, and Louisville ran all over them. Isaac Brown had 13 carries for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. Duke Watson, 11 for 69. Keywan Brown, 6 for 38. Maurice Turner, 6 for 22. Even considering Tyler Shough's sack yardage, they carried the ball 43 times for 214 yards. That's 5 yards per carry. You do that, you're going to have a great chance to win games. And then Tyler Shough through the air, 17 of 28, 293 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Pretty clean game from Louisville's signal caller. Chris Bell had a really good catch on the sideline to where he evaded a tackle and ran the ball. He had 2 for 101 and a touchdown. Ja'Cory Brooks, 4 for 68 and a touchdown. Kataris Hicks, really good performance from the redshirt freshman, 6 for 63. Nate Koriski had 2 for 33. Duke Watson, Isaac Brown, Chris Hughes all caught a pass each. So 7 different receivers that Tyler Shough targeted, and Louisville's offense just was able to move the ball really well. The Cardinals played a relatively clean game. They had a couple of penalties, a roughing the passer penalty that they didn't need to make. There was a holding call that I felt like was kind of tough to make that call. But overall, really good performance. And this was like the performance that you kind of look back on like right after the game and you're like, why can't this be the team that we see all year? Because I'll tell you, if this is the team, if you would have seen that, like more often than not, like if Louisville would have played this way for the majority of the season, you're talking about a playoff contender. I do think that this team would be in the playoff contention because, I mean, some of these losses, if you play like you did against Pittsburgh, against Stanford, you win that game. Same with SMU. Maybe same with Notre Dame. Miami is a little bit challenging because the defense just wasn't really all that great. But again, you are who your record says you are. Jeff Brom said it after the game. He said, look, only one team gets to be the national champion at the end of the year. This team still has a lot to play for. And I agree. I think that if you beat Kentucky next week, it is a successful season. And I know that that's something that some people disagree with, but I do think that it would be a successful season. And we'll discuss that matchup. We'll preview it as much as we need to coming up here in the next week. But this was a really nice win. It's nice to be able to just sit back and just enjoy a victory, especially against a Pittsburgh team that beat you last year. We had kind of circled this game as like, okay, we're really going to bring the boom to Pittsburgh. And then we saw how good that they seemed to be early on the season. We're like, that might be a loss. But, yeah, I mean, this team could have folded. They could have checked out mentally. They could have lost this game by double digits. They could have given up 400 yards of offense. They could have, turned the ball over and made a ton of mistakes, but they didn't. They played a complete performance. They sent their seniors off on a very high note, and they seized the momentum back, going into a very important season finale on the road in Lexington. So we will obviously preview that matchup as much as we need to. But for the remainder of the show, Louisville men's basketball with another victory, the second of the week. They defeated Winthrop on Friday night. There was some highs and some lows, but I'll tell you right off the bat, I was really, really impressed with how Javon Hadley played on Friday for Pat Kelsey's team. We'll discuss when we come back on today's episode of Locked On Louisville. Card Nation basketball season is obviously upon us. And I hope that you're utilizing GameTime to fill all of your ticketing needs. Because if you download the app, I'm telling you, it is the easiest and most convenient way with the most features to fill all of those needs. You have the all-in pricing feature that you can toggle on to show you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You have the GameTime Picks feature, which makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc., and on an app that gives you the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime Picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. Into the final segment of this special Sunday episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, recapping a really solid weekend for Louisville athletics. It started with a Louisville men's basketball victory over Winthrop on Friday evening. They got a 76-61 W over the Winthrop Eagles. Pat Kelsey's former head coaching stop. That was his first stop as a head coach. Excuse me. In his career, and they made a reappearance to the KFC Yum Center, and they gave Louisville a pretty solid test. Like, Louisville was up by 8 at the end of the first half, and it was a sort of an up and down performance with some pretty high highs and some pretty considerably low lows. I will say that, starting out, it's nice to get the victory. The Cardinals almost covered the spread. I think the spread was anywhere from 16.5 to 20.5, depending on when you, bet it. But I was excited to see Louisville win the game because I'm still kind of coming off the past 2 years to where, you lost these types of games. So seeing Louisville win them and winning them by double digits, it doesn't get old. Now, yeah, you're going to learn a lot about the team now with the battle for Atlantis coming up, but still, you got the win. You're 3-1 on the season. So looking at this, I was impressed with a couple of players. I think it starts with Javon Hadley. Rebounding was an issue in this game, but Javon Hadley was fantastic. 12 points and 13 rebounds. We talked about, with the Boubacar Traore missing an extended amount of time with a broken arm, you needed the collective of Javon Hadley, Noah Waterman, Kenai Roots, and I don't know why I was drawing blank, and Kaysen Pryor to step up in the rebounding category, and collectively I don't think that they did. But Javon Hadley had 13 rebounds. That's almost double than anyone else on the team. Terrence Edwards had 7. Hadley was really aggressive around the rim, 5 for 9. Had 3 offensive rebounds, played good on-ball defense. Really impressed with the Colorado transfer. That's the type of player that I believe that Louisville is getting consistently. Is a high energy, not the greatest shooter, but a situationally good shooter. High energy stretch 4, if you want to call him. He's 6'6", so not the tallest guy, but he does a really good job down low because of his athleticism and strength and just tenacity in the paint on both ends of the court. So it was really nice to see the way he played. Reyne Smith continues to be great. 5 for 9. He led the Cardinals with 20 points. 5 for 9 from 3. Actually, all of his attempts from the field came from the three-point line. He was 5 of 6 from the free throw line. He had 3 rebounds, 1 assist. Was really nice to see him just continually be a great shooter. And he's Louisville's leading scorer at this point, 14.8 points per game. James Scott had 5 blocks, which Winthrop's a team that likes to pound the ball down low. So it was nice to see Scott be solid in terms of protecting the rim. Noah Waterman also had 3 blocks. Not a great game from him. Only had 2 points. He fouled out with about 10 minutes left to go in the game. Terrence Edwards only had 6 points. Chucky Hepburn, 4 of 8 from the field. He was really consistent. 10 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. And then Kenai Roots and Kason Pryor off the bench. Kason Pryor, really tough night at the office offensively, 1 for 6. So nice to see Louisville get a double-digit win. Javon Hadley was great. They ended up forcing I think it was, trying to look at the turnover numbers. They ended up forcing 19 turnovers. And Winthrop shot the ball 20.7% from 3, which is actually below their season average of 27.5. But some of the same issues popped back up. Defense, rebounding. And we actually saw something like Louisville had 20 turnovers in this game. And I think that a lot of these were in the first half, like Kason Pryor. There was a time where he had like 3 turnovers in the span of like a minute. And I don't think this is going to be something that continues to go on and become an issue. Like Terrence Edwards dribbled the ball off his leg when he got the ball on an inbound pass. Like, I don't think these are going to be issues moving forward. I will say, before we get into improvements needed, this was the best ball movement that the team has had offensively. Like, the ball was continually moving, a lot of passes, a lot of movement after the passes. So considering how stagnant the offense looked, a lot of 5-out passing around the perimeter and just jacking up a shot at the end of the shot clock. The team was definitely much more engaged, and they're playing a lot more free offensively against Winthrop. But rebounding is still going to be an issue. Like, looking at this, Winthrop had 19 offensive rebounds. That's rough. There's no other way to put it. Like, yes, Pat Kelsey said after the game, he was applauding his team's effort around the rim and toughness as well. And I mean, the block shots speak for themselves, but there's something to be said about the offensive rebounds. Like, the team has to be better in terms of rebounding on the defensive end, because you're going to go up against teams like Indiana with more size. Omar Ballo, you're going to have to play, either West Virginia or Gonzaga. You're going to have to play them. Ole Miss is coming up. Duke is coming up. Kentucky is coming up. It's not going to get easier. Not at all. So you have to figure some things out. Like, Javon Hadley playing the way he did was a good start, but you have to have more players playing like that collectively. Like, Noah Waterman has to be better rebounding. Kason Pryor as well. It was nice to see Terrence Edwards with that many rebounds, but you need, as a collective unit, as a collective team, to just be better on that end, because 19 offensive rebounds to Winthrop. It's unacceptable. You did win the rebounding battle 44-41, but you have to be better in that regard. I do want to see also Louisville shoot the ball a little bit better for a team that's supposed to have a good amount of shooters. Another pretty rough 3-point percentage, or a pretty rough 3-point shooting game. I mean, they're 29.4% from the 3-point line this season. So I think that, some other players outside of Reyne Smith have to give you a consistent threat from behind the arc. I know everyone can hit the threes, but they have to just show that they can do it consistently, because I think that this system is predicated on you having to be able to run those. So, I mean, we'll learn a lot about the team this week. It was nice to see the team get 2 victories coming off of the Tennessee loss. They handled business. They won by double digits. But we're going to learn a lot about this team at the Battle for Atlantis. We'll talk about it coming up later this week. So more football talk and much more coming up as we continue through the week. Everyone have a great day. Have a great end of your weekend and start to your next week. We'll see you right back here very soon.